Okay, welcome back to the Mental Toughness Podcast.org. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you'll get one podcast email per week, just letting you know about the new episode at mentaltoughness.podcast.org. I'm Steve Siebold. I am your host as always, and today I want to talk about a topic that really gets under the skin of a lot of people, especially as I've spoken around the world to corporate audiences, national conventions, international conventions, and it's the idea about basically about habits, actions, and behaviors, and how those three things impact our success. And really, all this stuff comes from my book, my first book I wrote 20 years ago, 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class, which became a bestseller very quickly. I think it was 80 days or something like that way back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But one of the critical thinking questions that I talk about in this book, it's so key, and it really gets under people's skin, is, are your habits, actions, and behaviors congruent with the size and scope of your vision? I'll say it again because it's worth repeating. It's a great question. Are your habits, actions, and behaviors congruent with the size and scope of your vision? And if the answer is yes, congratulations. Fantastic. You're on the road. What are you going to say? I mean, that's just as good as it gets. But if the answer is no, and for most of us, it is no, then you have a choice to make. One of two. You can either increase and upgrade your habits, actions, and behaviors, or you can reduce the size and scope of your vision. Here's the problem. Nobody wants to reduce the size and scope of their vision. Everyone wants to get everything they want and become everything they want and go wherever they want and do whatever they want and all those things. But that requires, quite a bit of focus and discipline and effort and all that. Not all of us want to do that. So there's sort of a conflict here. But you have to be honest with yourself, I think. And that's the key to answering this question. And it gets under people's skin because typically the answer is no, I'm not. My habits, actions, and behaviors are not congruent with the size and scope of my vision. In other words, I think I should be doing more, selling more, being more successful, happier, more fulfilled, whatever it is, depending on the context of, what you're talking about in life. But yet my habits, actions, and behaviors don't reflect my ambition. And so that's a real problem. So basically what we end up doing for most of us, we end up reducing the size and scope of our vision. Or what we do is we don't reduce it and we just become frustrated. And that's why a lot of people, they say, people die with their music still in them. In other words, a lot of times because, they expected all these great things and they wanted all these great things, but their habits, actions, and behaviors were not sufficient to produce these things. And so you can't have it both ways type of thing. And it's a great question to ask yourself. And if you're running a team, if you're coaching someone, if you're coaching a team, coaching an individual, coaching a company, employees, a sports team, it could be parenting, asking your kids this. So they say, well, I want to be straight A student. Okay. Are your habits, actions, and behaviors in the classroom and beyond congruent with you wanting to be an A student? Well, I don't really like to study. I don't like to do outside activities and the extra credit was what we used to call it in our day. The schools used to call it. I don't know what they call it now, but it used to be called extra credit. I don't want to do extra credit. Well, all the top straight A students do extra credit. That way, if they get a B+ on an exam, they get an A because the extra credit makes up for the B+. So that was a strategy I learned way too late. But that's something. In other words, I want to be really fit and healthy, but my habits, actions, and behaviors is I like tacos and I like pizza and I like, all kinds of things that they're not in line with having a really healthy, fit body. So I want something, but, there's this cognitive dissonance where, I'm not doing what it takes, yet I'm frustrated with the result. And all I have to do really is look in the mirror and say, I'm not doing the things it takes. I'll give you an example from my own life. I've been playing guitar since I was 10 years old. I took my first guitar lesson when I was 10 years old. And I never really had much of a talent for it, but I enjoyed it. And I'm not really a super detailed person, a technical person. And so unless I force myself, and I'm still not very good at it, but I can force my way into it like anything else that you don't really have a talent for. So I learned to read music to some level, and I took guitar all the way through college, university. I played classical guitar in college, or I shouldn't say it like that. It sounds like I'm on the classical guitar team, which would be a little bit of a stretch. I took classical guitar in college, and I did recitals and that kind of thing. And I was pretty bad, but I enjoyed it. And whatever gains I achieved were completely earned because I was forced, because I didn't have the skill. I mean, some of the kids that came in, that had just started playing were better than me in 3 months. And, but I always wanted to be a much better guitar player. And I've been playing now. So that's going on. So I've been playing for almost 50 years, which is ridiculous, but that's crazy. And I still play. I still play a fair amount, mostly just by myself. I used to be in a band about 25 years ago, a little street band, not street band, garage band. And we were, again, pretty bad, but we had fun. And so my point is this: I always wanted to be a really good guitar player, but my habits, actions, and behaviors never showed that I wanted to be a good guitar player, because I'd take lessons and I'd stop, and I practice and I'd stop, and I work on things and I'd stop. You can't do that. So my habits, actions, and behaviors delivered pretty much, for someone that doesn't have a lot of guitar talent, pretty much delivered the exact result that I deserved, which was, I'm kind of a 3-chord player, as they say for guitar players, which means I'm not very good. Now, I've enjoyed it my whole life, and I don't have any regrets about that necessarily. But because if you're really going to be good, and if you don't have a lot of talent, then you're going to have to put in a lot of work. And I didn't put in the work. And so I got the result I should have gotten. But to be frustrated about it, I'm not frustrated about it, frankly. I think I look back and think maybe I should have put more time in over the years, and I probably would have enjoyed it more. But that being said, you can't go back. And I'm not frustrated about it because I know the work I put in and the work I didn't put in. So it's hard to, so that's okay. I can reconcile it and I can live with it. But where it's an issue is if I was very frustrated and thought, well, why aren't I should be so much better. No, I really shouldn't be much better. Based on the level of talent I have, which is not that much, combined with the lack of practice and lessons that I've taken over the years, I've gotten pretty much exactly what I should have gotten. And that's usually what I've found in life. Unless you have freakish talent in anything, and you can just pick it up and make it happen. And there are people that can do that. And we all have talent in some level. And I mean, some level of another. I remember my next door neighbor when I was growing up in Chicago. He was a couple years younger than me. He's still alive. He's a couple years younger than me. And I mean, when we were little kids, he was like 10 years old. The kid, like he wasn't real good in school, but he could take apart a radio back then and put it back together and make it work if it was broken. I don't know how he did it. No one ever taught him to do it. He just figured it out. I don't know how you do that. I take something apart. I can't even get all the pieces back together. I have extra pieces every time I put it back together. And I swear that those pieces are not necessary, and it should work just like it did before I took it apart, And there are people that can do that with car engines, and like, I know some people go to school for that kind of thing, or they become mechanics, or they become apprentices and they learn these things. But there are people that just somehow intuitively know how to do these things. It's like Paul McCartney can barely read music, and he's one of the most successful composers of all time, and he can barely read music. How does that work? Well, it's just freakish talent, right? So certain things like that's one thing. But when it comes down for most of us in most situations in most areas, specifically, most of the people that listen to this podcast are entrepreneurs, coaches, success coaches, sports coaches, people that really want to get a result. They're ambitious, or they're helping someone else get, a desired result. So we'll keep it in that context. But the bottom line is, if your habits, actions, and behaviors, or the person you're coaching, his or her habits, actions, and behaviors are not congruent with the size and scope of their vision, it's never going to happen. And there's going to be a lot of frustration. So you either have to reduce size and scope of vision, or you have to increase and upgrade your habits, actions, and behaviors. Those are the only choices you really have. And for most of us, again, I hate to say it, but it'd be great to say, well, we'll all just, increase and upgrade our habits, actions, and behaviors. Well, most of us are not going to do it. We should. I should too. I should start putting a lot more time in guitar, but I'm probably not going to do it. So I've got to decrease or reduce the size and scope of my vision. No big deal. There's no judgment on it. It's just that it needs to be one or the other. Mental toughness, so much as we talked about before, is about critical thinking. It's about getting into reality as opposed to fantasy. And I think most of us walk around in a semi-fantasy. You look at the things people believe. We've talked about this in other shows on critical thinking. The things that people believe in the world. It's almost like there's some level of insanity among a fairly good percentage of humanity. Not that people are really insane, but an emotional creature can be brainwashed into believing almost anything. If you tell them long enough and strong enough, they'll believe almost anything. I mean, it's the craziest darn thing because it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with brainwashing and emotional indoctrination. And so that's fine for most people. But if you want to be mentally tough, you can't allow yourself to fall prey to indoctrination or brainwashing or groupthink or any kind of mass thinking. You've got to think for yourself. You have to think critically. And this question is really a critical thinking question. Are your habits, actions, and behaviors congruent with the size and scope of your vision? So this is what you want. Are you doing the things to get it? Yes or no? That's all it comes down to. It's a great question to ask. It's a hard one because, again, most of us are falling short. But if you're not falling short, or if you can shore it up, your habits, actions, and behaviors, if you're not congruent, if you can say, well, what would that, and that'd be the question I'd have you ask. The second question would be, if not, if my habits, actions, and behaviors are not congruent with the size and scope of my vision, then what do I have to do to make them congruent? And that's the question. So then maybe you know the answer. You know, if it was guitar for me, I'd have to start practicing guitar. For me, at my talent and skill level, I need to start practicing a couple hours a day, and I need lessons. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I never took a music lesson in my life. And I know a lot of people like that. God bless them. I don't know how they do it. I think that's amazing. I really do. Because everything I learned from a guitar instructor, you know, and they're great. And so I have to take lessons. I can't do it that way. So I'd have to take lessons and I have to practice. I'm not going to do it, but if I wanted that result, then that's what I would do. But I apparently don't enough to take action like that. So I'm going to have to reduce the size and scope of my vision around my guitar playing, and that's fine. And so if you're willing to do that and you're okay with it, fine. If you're not, then you've got to decide or find out from someone what it actually takes to get to the point where you're saying, my habits, actions, and behaviors are completely 100% congruent with the size and scope of my vision. If I'm building a business, I'm doing the things that it takes to get there. You know, if I'm losing weight, I'm doing the things it takes to get there. If I'm trying to be a better parent to my kids, then I'm doing the things that it takes to get there. Otherwise, you have to settle for less. And that's okay. If you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. It's just a matter of, and if you're coaching someone, I recommend having this conversation. It's not an easy conversation to have, believe me. It's tough. When I worked with corporate America, you know, for so many years, the sales teams of large companies, I'd say to these guys, are your habits, actions, and behaviors as a salesperson, as a team, selling, you know, $500 or $600 million a year to collectively, of your product, are your habits as a team collectively, are your habits, actions, and behaviors congruent with the size and scope of your vision? Or the company's vision? And the answer was usually no. And people don't like it when you're coaching them around that because it's reality. Reality has a way, it's like a cold slap in the face for most people. I believe most is the right word. I would say many, but I believe it's most. I believe that most of us do not want the cold slap. And the cold slap, when it comes to performance, which is what mental toughness is all about. You know, if you're not into performance or getting something, mental toughness means nothing. It's just a concept, you know. But when you're under pressure, you want something, you're driving for something, mental toughness means almost everything. It's what keeps you going when a normal, rational human being would stop. You just keep going because you're mentally tough enough to keep your eyes on the prize while it looks like you have no chance of achieving the prize. So it's something to think about. So ask yourself, ask the person you're coaching, think about this concept. I would read the book. Shameless promotion for my 177 book, but it does wake people up. This book pisses a lot of people off, I will tell you. It's been sold all over the world. It's in 7 languages. You know, it's sold lots of copies, the whole thing. It's been featured all over the press and all those great things. But it pisses a lot of people off at the same time because it wakes them up. It's that cold slap of reality in the face where people go, wow, you know, that was abrupt. And wow, I have to actually do all these things to get what I want. Yeah, you do. That's reality. And if you don't want to do them, no problem. No one's judging you. It's your life. Okay? But then accept the fact that those things are not going to happen and learn to live with it. And that's fine. It's your life. You decide. But that question is probably the best critical thinking question I've ever come up with. And I wrote a whole book on critical thinking questions. 1,080 critical thinking questions. What kind of a goofball writes a book with 1,080 critical thinking questions in it? I do. That's what I did. It's called Coaching, the 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. I wrote it as a complimentary book to this book for Johnson & Johnson. They asked me to write it many years ago, almost 20 years ago. And I did. And it's a good book on critical thinking questions, 1,080 critical thinking questions. But this question, are your habits, actions, and behaviors congruent with the size and scope of your vision, is the number one critical thinking question I've ever written. And I think it's worth consideration in performance. Okay, so that's the show for today. I appreciate you listening and watching. And remember to subscribe. You got to subscribe so we can send you the email every week at mentaltoughness.podcast.org. mentaltoughness.podcast.org, and I'll see you on the next show.